So I'm pleased to be telling you guys today about our Conservation Dogs program for the New York, New Jersey Trail Conference. And just a little background for those of you that are not familiar with the New York, New Jersey Trail Conference. We have been connecting people with nature since 1920, which means that we're turning 100 this year. We're a nonprofit, volunteer-powered organization. We're known for building, maintaining, and protecting trails. But we also help to preserve land and advocate for access to open space and stewardship of our natural areas. And the genesis of our program with the stewardship program, we developed fairly traditionally. We started in 2011 with an invasive strike force volunteer surveyors. In 2012, we added volunteer invasive species removal work days. And in 2013, we added seasonal interns that started conducting herbicide treatments. But in 2018, we added an innovative component. And the reason we did this is because the lower Hudson PRISM prioritizes early detection species. And we're most successful if populations are found when they're small. And we went through several ideas about how we could get better at early detection. And we ended up with an opportunity to use detection dogs to supplement our invasive species early detection and removal activities. We thought the benefits to this was we could be more thorough in our removal activities and move invasive species populations to an eradicated state sooner. With less staff time and less effort on our human standpoint, and hopefully less cost as well. So this program is a relatively new program. Like I said, the idea started in early 2018, and the next thing is finding the right team to work with. So we engaged with Working Dogs for Conservation. It's a nonprofit organization that's been doing this kind of work with invasive species, rare and endangered species, and various other conservation activities with dogs for about 20 years. And they agreed to mentor our program. We also needed to find the right dog handlers. And the dog handler has to be in tune with their canine's behavior, and they have to be able to react and reward in a timely way. We were very fortunate that we were approached by a dog handler who was already experienced with FEMA search and rescue live detection work with his dog, and he gained an appreciation and interest in conservation and wanted to find a way to marry the two activities together. But then we had to find also the right dog, and the right dog has to have the right personality. There's several different aspects that we needed to evaluate in the dog, and these are just some of the ones I wanted to focus on with you, but there's more. The first one is athleticism. The dog has to have endurance and agility. They have to be able to do this work. And we also want them, this is extremely important, they have to have a really high drive and be obsessed with their toy. The toy is the reward for the work that they do. And so you really want a dog that is just so focused on that toy that they want to work till they drop to get that toy. Of course, we don't let that happen, but that's the kind of dog that you're looking for. And we also want a dog that's very persistent, that's not just going to, get distracted by a squirrel or a deer that runs through, that they are focused and they are persistent in getting what they want. And also a dog that has a desire to please and interact with its human. That's really critical as well. And I can talk about that a little bit later, but you do want them to be social. So a lot of these qualities are qualities that do not make great pets. They're hard dogs that may be difficult for the average family to live with. And so that's sort of what we're looking for. And by the way, we are looking for another dog for our program right now. So if these qualities, ring a bell with a dog that you know, please let us know. So once we thought we found the right dog, we had to do a little bit of evaluation. And let's see, I tried to embed a video here. Let's see if this works. There's no sound. So remember I said athleticism and persistence and a very strong desire for that toy. You can see she's still working, still looking for that toy, still trying to get through. This was a dog that was 11 months old and had been bred for hunt tests, hunt competitions. And here's the part, desire to work with the human. And now let's see, okay. So that was the dog that we did end up getting. Here's the journey back from Wisconsin and arrival in New York. And the first month we spent, the handler spent bonding with the dog and housebreaking. She was not housebroken, and just basic obedience. And this is our dog and handler team, Joshua Beasy, and the dog's name is Dia. So our team has been formed, and that was in August and September of 2018. The next thing was choosing the target species that we wanted to teach. And we learned some things about what types of species we should choose. The first is the species should not be common. You don't want your dog alerting all the time everywhere you go for a walk or out in public. The species should not be that common in the area where the dogs live. And it also needs to be obtainable. We needed to be able to obtain samples for training. And this is, you're not going to be teaching, able to train if you can't obtain the samples. And also we needed a species that was identifiable for the handler. The handler had to be able to identify the species so that he could properly reward the dog. And so for our first species, we chose Scotch Brome. Scotch Brome is a tier 2 species, an early detection species in the lower Hudson. We knew several locations. We'd already been managing it for several years, and we knew most of those locations were getting to be either with no plants found or very sparse. And so this is a perfect timing to allow us to start bringing in the dog to help find those stray plants that we couldn't find. But also Scotch Brome is evergreen. And so we could train during the winter. Remember, we got the dog in August, bonded in September. We needed something that we could start training over the winter and then have a field season in the spring. So Scotch Brome fit the bill on several different aspects. This is how we started training. So this was in November of 2018, and this is in our office. First of all, the handler traveled to Working Dogs for Conservation in Montana to work 3 of their dogs, and also took Dia with him to get her started on scent detection. They worked with an artificial scent first to teach the game to the dog. So by using an artificial scent, you know that they're not going to experience that scent anywhere else in their life. And it will only be when you're working in training. And you basically teach them that they get their toy, their reward, when they let you know that they've found that scent. And you can work on an indication, which could be a sit or a bark. We're advised to use sit because if you ever would want to use your dog to search out rare and endangered animals, you may not want them to bark. So we taught a sit as the indication. And you can work with that artificial scent on that first. This picture here is showing our first introduction to the Scotch broom scent. Those little black boxes in quotes, they're actually, you might recognize those as takeout containers with a hole cut in the top. And we put the clipping of Scotch broom in one of the boxes, let the dog go through, and when they sniff the one that has the clippings, you reward them. She hasn't told you that she saw it, but you just reward her when she sniffs that. And after several different trials of that, she gets it, and she knows, okay, when I sniffed it, you're going to give me the reward. So she stops and turns to you and waits for her reward. Then you start asking for the indication. After we got that going for several repetitions, then we added in clippings of other non-target plants. So something that wasn't Scotch broom. We had collected up a few different things. And of course, when you're handling all of these things, you have to be careful not to contaminate the scent with different, and the boxes with different scents. So we always kept the one box for Scotch broom and would just move them around in the order. Okay, so, and after the first day, she pretty much got it. All right, so then May into the field. Josh and Dia scouted their first Scotch broom sites in May of 2019. The sites were sites that we had expected to have no or few plants, and sites which had been visited this year, or sites which had been visited this year by our early detection rapid response team, where they'd already gone through and done removals. And we also had them do some boundary searches to see if the populations were maybe a little bit bigger than we expected, see if there were any stray plants on the boundaries. And so the results are they searched 34 sites, took about 50 hours of search time, and they covered 31.4 acres and found 1,215 plants. So what that works out to, if you do the math, about an hour and a half per acre to search, and 40 plants found per acre. And the type of plants we're talking about are plants shown here in the picture, which can be fairly inconspicuous when it's among various other vegetation. So we really felt like this was very successful. And just a couple of more notable finds. Take a moment and try to find Scotch broom in these pictures. There they are. So if you found that hard, you can tell how useful having the dog's nose is for searching for invasive species. The next thing we did was in July, we taught Dia Slender false brome. Slender false brome is an invasive grass. Those of you in Western New York, PRISM, are probably quite familiar with it. Initially, we trained using potted plants and clippings from those potted plants, and then traveled up to Letchworth State Park in Western, I think that's Western New York, right? Field training, and Dia found this previously unknown site during training. So we also feel that that was a fairly successful thing. We chose Slender false brome because this species was one our crews were having a lot of difficulty with. A lot of people, even if you're fairly good at identifying plants, grasses can be your downfall. It can be very difficult for people to distinguish different grasses. We were not sure whether the dog could do this, and it turns out she can do it just fine. and she can distinguish this grass from other grasses. We asked our handler, and he said, well, he can sort of distinguish it too. It smells a little bit like green tea to him. But, you know, maybe that's in his head anyway. So here's some results. We searched our known sites in the Lower Hudson PRISM. We have just a handful of sites and the surrounding areas. About 500,000 square feet searched and found 992 plant clumps that were found. Notable find was shown in this photo. The handler and Dia were walking to one of our sites along a trail. The dog pulled him way off trail, 300 feet off trail, and this is what she found. This little clump of grass right in the middle of the photo there amongst the brambles. So needless to say, we're pretty happy with the way things are going. The next target species was spotted lanternfly. In August, we decided to teach Dia to detect adult spotted lanternflies, and also in November, the egg cases. And so we also, at this point, decided to introduce a second dog, Fagen. Fagen is Josh Beasley's FEMA search and rescue dog, and he thought Fagen could do this too. So this was Fagen learning his scent, getting rewarded for sniffing that scent in just one place, and teaching him the game. And we also added our assistant handler, Arden Blumenthal. Arden volunteered with us for several hundred hours last year and is now a part-time employee. So she's going to be getting her own search dog soon, as soon as we find an appropriate dog. The spotted lanternfly searching introduced a lot of complexity, a myriad of search scenarios, vehicle searches, vineyards and nurseries, supply and lumber yards. And dogs aren't great generalizers. You pretty much have to teach them in each different situation that they need to be searching. And these different situations also require different search skills. So searching a vehicle requires them to, you know, search different parts of the vehicle, maybe climb up onto the vehicle a little bit. Whereas searching for plants was just sort of basically like running through a field. So different methods that they had to learn. So a lot of different training in different scenarios that had to be put in place. So here's some searching high and low, teaching the dog to actually search up a tree. Not a very natural thing for them to do. If any of you have dogs that like to sniff a lot, you know that they like to put their nose on the ground to sniff. So teaching the dogs that, you know, in this situation to search up those trees was something. And then under the railroad tracks as well. I love this photo with Josh checking out, what did you find under the railroad tracks there? So these are the notable finds. Fagen found this dead adult in the truck grill that you were seeing him look at. And Dia, what she found under this railroad track was an egg case of the spotted lanternflies. And I think all of you guys can imagine how difficult these kinds of things would be for humans to find, and how, you know, they might find them, but it would take a lot longer to search for them. So this one, I also love this one. So do you see the spotted lanternfly in this video? Do you see it yet? How about now? That's one probably humans would not have found. Okay, so we've collaborated with several agencies, the USDA APHIS in New Jersey. We've been doing several searches with them at vineyards and natural areas, sort of a railroad depot area, and also New York State DEC and DOT in New York for vehicle inspections. We supported 3 vehicle inspections, actually 3, I'm pretty sure. I only put Worcester and Preble in here, but I believe it was another one as well. Responded to spotted lanternfly reports in Western Orange County, New York, doing multiple property searches to verify that there was no infestation there, just some adult spotted, and it's been really great. So some of the lessons that we learned as part of doing this, that the dog teams working in tandem with our strike force and other human searchers is very successful. Having the humans search and also the dog search. Humans use visual techniques, dogs use the smell, and you often find things that the others have not seen. We've been sending our strike force in to do removals at our, our treatment sites, get them to go through, completely comb the area, and then send the dogs in, and the dogs find things that were missed. We also found that too many pulled up plants are distracting for the dogs. So when the invasive strike force crew has gone through, pulled up a lot of plants, piled them off to the side, the dog's like, oh boy, there's a lot of scent over here. And they can be very distractive. So it's very important when we do our work now to make sure that we have consolidated the pulled up plants into an area away from where we want the dog to search. We've also found that it's most effective to send the dogs to sites where the target is sparse. So we don't want to send the dog to sites where, it's a real dense infestation. It's not really useful to send the dog to a site like that unless you need to do a boundary search. And so the dogs can and have helped us determine boundaries of the infestation. Usually they are able to find some stray plants that are out further than we had known. And then we also found that having a show me command was very useful. Anybody's familiar with metal detecting, and you use a metal detector and you get a signal, but then once you start to dig down in that hole, you use a pinpointer. And this is sort of, the show me command is sort of like the pinpointer for the dog. So they tell you when they've got the scent and they give you an indication. If you don't see it right away, or you can't really tell where they're talking about, to be able to say show me and have the dog touch it with their nose or go close to it, that has been extremely useful to us. And then our next targets are oak wilt. Oak wilt is a fungus that is inside trees. So this will be an interesting experiment to see whether the dogs are able to detect and adequately indicate on oak wilt. And that training will be starting in March, and we'll be doing that with Karen Snowball in Cornell. We're also working on, thinking of working on sticky sage, which our invasive strike force has been treating in Dutchess County for several years now. It's a very big infestation, but we had a large amount of treatment done last year, which we believe will result in sparse individuals in over a large acreage. And we think it would be very useful to be able to have the dogs search out those sparse individuals for treatment. We're also thinking about teaching kudzu in the fall. We've been working with DEC to treat the kudzu populations in the lower Hudson area. And several of those sites have now gone into the monitoring phase, so that there's very few plants or none. And we thought it might be nice to be able to have the dogs search some of those monitoring sites and see if there's anything that's been missed. So those are our plans for 2020. We've been told by our mentors that the dogs could learn up to 3 species a year. And the way things seem to be going, the dogs learn the species fairly quickly. It takes maybe a week or two to really have it down. Sometimes even less than a week is where you feel like, yes, they really know what you're asking them to do. So we think that's entirely reasonable, and we're excited to see what we can do with the dogs in early detection. Another thing that we're using conservation dogs for is outreach. Conservation dogs are a wonderful way to gain attention for invasive species issues. We did 4 demonstrations already, and we're reaching new audiences because we're finding that a lot of audiences on our social media are attracted to what we're posting because they like dogs, not necessarily because they know anything about the environment. And so we feel like we're reaching new audiences because the dogs are the attractant. So we're scheduling demos, and we have several upcoming demos where you can see Dia and Fagen in action. March 21st, Clearpool's Maple Sugar and Pancake Breakfast, the one I mentioned on the lead-in slide. And April 11th at Cornell Cooperative Extension, Dutchess County. May 9th at T-Town's Plant Fest in Ossining. You can check for more details on these events and other events on our Lower Hudson PRISM events page. And we've also gotten a lot of press because a lot of people are very interested in how we're using the dogs. So we got some local press in New Jersey and New York. Shore Home and Gardens magazine is down in Maryland. Then in August, we had an AP News article written about us, which went to more than 100 papers, including the New York Times, and the Washington Post, London, and Taipei. And following up with the Journal News and Farm Bureau of New York papers, we've been able to get out messages about invasive species, about the importance of early detection, and about awareness for spotted lanternfly, especially in New York. We've been really focusing a lot on spotted lanternfly in the press that we've gotten for New York. Finally, I'd like to thank our sponsors. This project is partially supported by funds from the Environmental Protection Fund, is administered by the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. Major funding was provided by the Orenreich Foundation, and additional funding was provided by the Laura J. Niles Foundation, the Zoffness family, Robert Ross, Ray Begnan, and Jan Gladkopf, and many other private donors. So if you're interested in following our program, you can follow us on Instagram at Dia Saves the Forest, and you can see what the dogs are up to and follow our activities. So